Welcome to the Going for Two podcast, a podcast with hosts that are not afraid to have more entertaining guests than hosts. I'm one of those hosts, Ben Cobb, joined today by the other one and only Logan Sartain. And Logan, we're not alone today, are we?
We are not. We are pleased to be joined by the one and only Daniel Zepeda, a friend of ours from ACU, a fellow Wildcat. And Daniel is, he's a Houston guy. He's a big Astros, Rockets, Texans fan. Am I right, Daniel?
Oh, yeah. All three fronts. Correct.
There we go. And Daniel is currently a reporter for the Temple Daily Telegram. So we have a legit journalist on the podcast.
This is awesome.
What are we doing, Ben? Is this a real thing?
This is unprecedented. This is like the past 5 minutes, we have just made that leap as a podcast from bringing on just friends and family to now we're getting into the sports media world as we know it. So this is a big deal for us.
So Ben, when we
I don't know how much you guys want to use around the legitimate term for a reporter, but I'll take it. Appreciate it, guys.
Well, Ben, when we had our last guest on, and Daniel, for your information, that was Selvin, another ACU alum, and I forgot to do something that I wanted to do. I wanted to admit something to every one of our guests. So to Selvin, if you're listening to this episode, I'm going to admit to you that my brother can't pronounce your name, and he calls you Sullivan. So there's that. And
nice.
Daniel, I got to admit to you that I was always a little bit jealous of you when I just feel like you knew the inner workings of the JMC department and that you had like a tight-knit relationship with Barb. And I just felt like, man, you like kind of saw behind the curtain. So what was that like?
Oh, Barb. Oh, man. I miss her. Barb is such a sweetheart. For those of you who don't know, Barb was kind of the journalism kind of the main assistant, I guess. She was the assistant to the department chair. And I think she's still over there, but she's just such a sweetheart. I got to spend, I believe, maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years. It's been a while. Just working for her and kind of, running errands, working part-time, helping out her. And she was so awesome. She was just so easy to work with. She was always there with, a positive, whatever you needed. So you really couldn't have asked for a better boss. But as far as seeing behind the curtain, as you said, I saw some things. I got to be around Dr. Bacon, who was the department chair at the time. Kenneth Bibas is now the department chair, and he's doing a fantastic job over there. But I got to see some stuff. Don't really have any crazy stories. I guess the coolest part of that would be a couple of times each semester I would have to do a little bit of filing, which doesn't sound exciting at all when you just say it like that. But the cool thing was it was for the internships. Now, Logan, I don't know if you remember, but when we had to do our internships, we kind of had to do a kind of a PowerPoint, I believe. I think I did a PowerPoint, and I think that was the thing most of them went with. So you kind of see the PowerPoint, then you kind of see a journal of what the internships of these students, what that entailed and what they had to do. So kind of seeing all the different backgrounds and seeing all the different avenues as far as internships that a lot of our JMC students went through was really exciting. So, some really cool ones, some ones that you wouldn't think would really qualify as JMC, but it did have an aspect to it. It was really cool. So that was probably one of the more cooler things that I remember from that. But just overall, Barb was so amazing. I definitely spent enough time in the JMC building to feel like I should definitely have a statue outside there. But no one will return my calls on that. But we'll see how that goes. But ACU, man, gotta love it. Miss it. A lot of times I wish I could go back. Feels like life was a lot easier back then. Definitely wasn't the coronavirus then. So there's that.
For sure. So that's a great segue into kind of what we want to talk about today. And I feel like you can't talk sports in this day and age without mentioning the coronavirus and its impact. But before we get into that, if we hadn't had all that, what we would probably be talking about right now in the heat of baseball season is the Astros coming fresh off of their cheating scandal. So tell me, as an Astros fan, as a quote unquote legitimate reporter, was that a big deal, no big deal, somewhere in between? What are you thinking?
Well, the fan in me has always kind of leaned more towards, hey, it's kind of naive to think that this doesn't go on across the board in some level or another, throughout all major league franchises. The Astros just, maybe they did a little better, did a little more extensively, and for that, kind of put themselves out there a little bit more, to get caught eventually. So part of me thinks that, hey, it's not that big of a deal. Let's just move on. I think a lot of people feel that way. Hey, let's move on. It's harder to do that now because we're still not playing games. But
Right.
That's my biggest thing on it. And then I also see from the other side, it's if you're a franchise that because of the Astros success, you weren't able to reach the top that you felt your team was capable during that season, then I can only understand your frustration. You got the Yankees, you got the Dodgers, the Red Sox, Astros. They beat a lot of good teams in their run to the championship, and then that year after. So I can definitely see it from other ends, but all in all, my hopefully unbiased opinion is that I really feel like if Major League Baseball wants to take a crack at this, then they're really going to have to widen their scope. The Yankees and Red Sox have been mentioned through this. You've already had several managers be hired and fired because of this. Carlos Beltran with the New York Mets, he didn't even get to manage a single game before this kind of went at him, and they just let him go just because of his connection. So I feel like if we really want to give it the full attention it needs, then we do need to widen our scope and really see how we can affect this. But I mean, I think right now it's easy because everyone can point at the Astros with their success, and it's easy to have one villain than just to say it's a universal problem. So we'll see what happens. I'm eager to just get the games going again, honestly, like a lot of fans, right. And we'll see where it goes from there.
Daniel, I'm interested. You're talking about how this happens in sports sometimes, and usually it's just the people that are caught that are punished, but a lot of the time there are other teams or players that are participating in cheating or a competitive edge, if you want to put it that way. How does this compare to some of the other sort of cheating scandals that we've seen in other sports? So for example, the Patriots and the NFL with Spygate, and then doping scandals in biking, with kind of some of those other big name cheating media scandals. How does this fit into that? Is it kind of top of the list, bottom of the list? Doesn't really compare to that? What's your thought on that?
Well, I don't think it's the bottom of the list. I mean, this is a very, this has become something that has affected a lot of teams, a lot of players, front offices, the whole movement in baseball to go from your traditional scouting players. You can hear how a player hits the ball, the crack of the bat, those kind of traditional scouting. All of that's been changed. The game has really moved to the analytical side, where you look at the data, you look at the representation, and you really kind of gauge from that point. 20 years ago even, walks were not considered as good as hits, I should say, even though it's the same result for the most part. So again, as an Astros fan, I would like to be able just to sweep this all under the rug and say, oh, it's not a big deal. This isn't something we need to worry about. Let's just move on. But I mean, it is a big deal. I mean, you've seen a lot of displeasure from a lot of organizations, a lot of fans, a lot of players who think that this needs to be addressed. And they're absolutely right. But like I said, I think we need to widen the scope. But to answer your question, as far as how it stacks up with other scandals, I would definitely say it's up there. I don't know if it's as impactful as Lance Armstrong and the Tour de France, all of his titles with that. Deflategate, I never really thought Deflategate was a huge deal. I know Tom Brady, was a 4-game suspension. But then usually I'm just kind of an easygoing guy. I'm more of like, well, let's just move on, But there are certain things where you do need to take a step back and say, hey, this is a problem. If we don't address this, it's only going to get worse. And we're trying to keep the game competitive and even all across the board. So while I think a lot of teams are using not just analytics, but for lack of a better word, I guess some form of spying, some form of what's been classified as cheating, stealing video, stuff like that. I think it's just we need to make it where you can do X, Y, and Z, and that's easily pointed out, and it's easily a bar is set where, hey, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. Or we just need to get rid of it altogether. Just like I said, make it even. But as far as how it stacks up, I think it's up there. I don't think it's gonna revolutionize or change the game. I don't think it's steroids or anything like that. But at the same time, that's the risk is just thinking that this is nothing and then no changes get made.
Mm-hmm. So let's let the inner Astro fan and you take a breath. And let's look at this season. So, new manager, new GM, no trash cans, no cameras in the wrong places. Are the Astros a good baseball team? Are they a contender? Are they a playoff team? Do they win? How far do they go? Given that we have a season.
Right. Well, that's the big question right now. I mean, everyone's talking about, maybe starting up in July. I think they were talking about even bringing all the teams to New Mexico and Arizona, and just trying to have everyone kind of play their normal games there at spring training games. But for sure, the Astros are a great organization. I'm trying to be unbiased here, but what makes the 2017 scandal as it's so gut-wrenching is that the Astros had a fantastic team. It's still kind of unbeknownst to me why they would rely on something like that. You look at that lineup from top to bottom, just so many great hitters, not really a weak spot where you could really attack. I mean, they could rally at any point. The starting pitching was fantastic in the playoffs. We got bullpen guys in the bullpen stepping up when they needed to. So I mean, to beat the Dodgers, who every year here lately, it seems like they just have a fantastic team. To beat them was amazing. And again, that's what makes it so hard is that I feel like the Astros were the best team in baseball that year. And now to have it, as an asterisk, it just really hurts. It just feels like there was no need for it. As far as this coming year goes, I really don't feel like the past 2 years since that championship that they've taken a down road. They still have your big guys. You still got Carlos Correa at shortstop. You still got Jose Altuve, the batting champ, almost every year at second base. Alex Bregman, hate him or love him, he's got the attitude, he's got the swag. But I mean, he's one of the best third basemen, if not one of the best players in all the league. And then, as in the outfield, Michael Brantley, he'll get on base. George Springer, he has a good year. He could probably hit 40 home runs in a year. And then their starting pitcher, you got Justin Verlander. Garrett Cole had to shave off the old beard, but he's headed to New York for the Yankees. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But we still got Zach Greinke, and the pitching's still solid. So I definitely think they're going to be competitive. I think they can win the AL West. I think they can definitely make it to the ALCS. I don't want to say no problem because I mean you never know what's going to happen. But I can see that, and then get into the World Series. Yeah, if you can get past the Yankees, but man, that's going to be the true test. I think is just the Yankees. They get their guys healthy, and that'll be a sight. So hope for a season first and foremost, and then you hope everyone stays safe and healthy throughout the year. And let's just get the baseball rolling. No asterisks this time.
Yeah, Daniel, you had mentioned that getting the season rolling again, and I think you and every other baseball fan and probably sports fan wants that to happen. And I think we're about to transition into this conversation about what the season will look like when and if it starts to roll out. But my main question, most important question of the night is, have you been watching any Korean baseball?
I've definitely had enough free time on my hands to venture into that, but I got to say I'm not on board with it just yet. Now, once the ESPN Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance, kind of rolls out and finishes, which I think it only has one more week
Yeah, I
left
think
this
so.
coming Sunday.
Mhm.
We'll see. I might tune it on over to see some live sports, because I really think that's all people want at this point.
Yeah.
At this point, you know, bowling, washer boards, cornhole,
Yeah.
just any competitive that you can put on a screen. I think people are just going to eat up. So
Love it.
personally, I haven't seen anything about it, but I keep seeing stuff on social media that bat flips are a little more prominent in the
Oh, there
KBO.
we go.
So
I'm gonna have to check
that
that out.
alone may get my interest.
Logan, I had never thought we would be talking about the KBO on the Going for Two podcast, but here we are.
I knew
It's,
it.
it's a
I just had a
monumental night.
feeling. So Daniel,
Great.
you said you haven't been watching Korean baseball. You've been watching the Jordan documentary. What else? Are you a fan of Tiger King? Have you started any new shows? Watching old sports or the video game live streams? What's been your binge of choice lately?
Well, last time I checked, I did have a pulse, so that means I have seen Tiger King. So stay relevant and seen that. But
There you
yeah,
go.
me and my wife, we knocked that out. I think maybe within the first week that it was out, and that was
Yeah.
was definitely interesting to say the least. Um, I'm a big fan of going back and rewatching old games. I
Okay.
used to have a pretty considerable collection of games just on like those, I don't know, recordable DVDs. I guess you used to tape games back in the day. I kind of did that a little bit. Can't find them, but we've moved a couple of times, so I'm sure it got lost eventually somewhere. But I know ESPN. They put out some of Kobe Bryant's older games against the Celtics in the playoffs, so I've seen some of those.
Oh,
Uh, are you a Dallas Maverick fan, Logan?
I am. Man, my NBA allegiance is not very doesn't run real deep for Dallas.
Okay.
I'd probably call myself more of a Spurs fan, but there hasn't been much to cheer about lately.
Well, that's okay. Y'all had the last 20
yeah.
Yeah,
to be happy, but
yeah.
no, I mentioned that I saw that was one of the games I watched recently was the Dallas Mavericks Miami Heat
Hmm.
NBA Finals game where Dirk kind of leads them back there in the fourth quarter. So that was a good one. So stuff like that, I'm really interested in. I just like going back and watching old stuff. As far as regular TV, I got to go with The Office. Got to go with Parks and Recreation.
Nice.
Those are
Solid.
my main two, pretty much. When Friends was on Netflix, I watched Friends as well. So stuff like that. And then I don't know how I'll get bored. And even today, there's this new thing on Netflix. I think it's called Absurd Planet. It's essentially a documentary about the Earth and whatnot, but it's crazy. It's got like
Hmm.
goofy added, kind of makes it a little more entertaining. So it's they're like 15-minute episodes, so it's something to just play in the background. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm kind of open to anything and everything. I'm sure I will get to Korean baseball sooner or later.
Nice.
So Daniel, let's take it back to Major League Baseball. Are we going to have a season this year? And if so, what is that going to look like?
That's a good question. I think most of Major League Baseball officials are like other sports leagues, just really up in the air. Nobody wants to be the league that comes back too quickly and something happens, and then then kind of becomes the blueprint down the road of, hey, this is what not to do in a health
Right.
crisis like this. UFC has had a lot of success. Soccer is trying to come back as well. So there's little pockets of the sporting world that are still trying to make it work. Obviously, if baseball comes back, there's not going to be any fans. I think that's been kind of decided by all major sports leagues, is that you can't really have fans if you do, it might be like the Korean baseball where you're putting maybe a couple of people on an entire row of seats, which is really bizarre when you think about it. But as far as when and where, I'm not sure. When I think the latest timetable is maybe we can get the season started in July. So when typically the Midsummer Classic would be, if you're looking at opening day, which is again this whole thing is just bizarre when you think about it. Not anywhere I think any one of us thought we would be this season. Where, I'm not sure. I know at the beginning of the show we talked about how they were talking about maybe bringing all the teams to New Mexico and Arizona, kind of like spring training, and maybe doing it like that. But I really don't know. There's just so much speculation when the data comes out and new information comes out. It adjusts everything from top to bottom, and really kind of I think these leagues start to plan some kind of timeline, and they try to make some kind of plan. But then if new information comes out, that's almost scrapped. But the big news I think from a couple of days ago is that Major League Baseball had a bunch of their employees tested for the coronavirus, antibodies, which if you have them, it usually leads to you getting COVID-19. In the study, only 0.7% of their employees actually had the antibodies. So, I mean, it's a remarkably low number. The officials who led the study, in the medical field from a bunch of different universities, they were really stunned. They didn't think it would be very high, but at the same time, they didn't think it would be that low. So that's definitely a positive, somewhere, just a jumping off point. So we'll see. I think the only thing set in stone is going to be whenever this thing does get kicked off and we do get sports back, all across the board, baseball, basketball, football, maybe even. I don't think we're going to have fans. So that's definitely going to be different. Kind of unprecedented times right now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Daniel, this is kind of maybe an off-the-wall question, and maybe shows that I didn't play baseball a ton growing up. But, the baseball season typically runs from spring until October, right? If it were to have a shifted schedule, how much could the baseball season go into the winter, and how much would the weather affect that? Obviously, there's not all of them would have to play in that scenario, but let's say many of the teams were forced to play outside during the winter months. Would that be feasible and tenable?
Well, if the Houston Astros and Texas Rangers got some late November, early December games, I don't think they'd be complaining. Usually sweating their butts off during the summer. The first thing that pops up to me is your East Coast teams. Right now, the Yankees, very feasible that they're going to be playing, in the World Series, even the ALCS. The Red Sox, just there, and a bunch of other teams that, have a chance of getting into the playoffs. So you start talking about extending the season to Christmas, which is what I've heard, possibly, making it to the week before Christmas, even the week after Christmas, if we start in July, like they're talking about. You never know how the weather's going to be up there with the snow and the wind and everything else. And if you're playing in a closed stadium, then yeah, obviously it's not a big deal. You can make it work. But you're playing a Yankee Stadium, you're playing over at Fenway. Oh man, it's just you have no idea what that weather's going to be like. And then you get some really bad weather, you have to extend games, you have to postpone. Then you're just drawing out the season even longer, which it's kind of mixed. There's been people who are okay with extending the season that far. There are people that are just like, nope, absolutely not. Baseball does not need to go that far. But it's kind of like at this point, if that's the only option, what do you do? So yeah, I think your teams in the South, California is beautiful all year long, so that's not going to be a problem. But your northern, especially East Coast teams, you're playing into December. Yeah, you're kind of playing with fire. You might be great. All you need is some hot chocolate, but you might get a huge snowstorm as well. So yeah, that would be the main thing that comes to mind when I think about the weather at that time. So we'll see what happens, and yeah, it's just I definitely know for sure Texas teams would not mind opening up the roof, especially the Rangers with that new ballpark. Playing
Mm-hmm.
some chillier games. So definitely be a nice change of pace.
Definitely.
So is that schedule, that timetable that puts baseball ending around the end of December, is that for a full length schedule?
I believe so. At this point, I think the latest is that if things were to run like not get any worse from here on out, that the start of the season would be I think that first week or definitely early part of July. And then
Mm-hmm.
if they did that, it would probably be around December, because you're looking at, what is that, quick math, under 6-7 months, whereas you've got the typical start of baseball is in March,
Right.
which runs into October, so that's 7 months there. So it's about the same length, but there's also been talk about maybe doing 7 inning double headers, so you try to get in one extra game. You're losing a few innings, which some people are dead set against, kind of reverting to a little bit of college and high school level there. But it just depends on what people are willing to sacrifice in order to get anything at this point. So the double headers there, not allowing so much travel time, obviously, in between games. So just things like that are really still up in the air. And again, it's just what are people, what is the organizations, what is the league willing to do? Rob Manfred, what is he willing to kind of pull the trigger on in order to make sure that we get some kind of baseball this year? Because it just being in this limbo is definitely not helping. But
Right.
what else are you going to do, I guess?
So I heard that there has been a proposal that went from the owners now to the players for a reduced schedule. I believe an 82 game season. If that were to be the case, starting in July, who does that benefit, if anybody? Does it benefit the teams that are maybe kind of mediocre, being a shorter season? Like the Rangers last season had a really great start, and then they fizzled out towards the end. Would they benefit from that, or is it? Do you look at teams with better hitting or worse pitching, or vice versa? Who does a shorter schedule benefit?
I think it definitely benefits the teams that, like you mentioned, are a little bit on the bubble. So you look at their roster; you're not expecting a World Series, but then again, you're not expecting to finish at the bottom of your division either. When you have a shorter season like that, automatically, you get rid of the increased risk of having injuries just because of overuse. So your pitchers are going to benefit. Your bullpen is going to drastically benefit from that. Um, Teams that are, they've already got a strong roster, they've probably got some guys that are going to have to get sent down to the lower levels, but they're capable of being on a major league roster. Those teams aren't going to really benefit or kind of gain any kind of leverage from that, because they're already planning on being good. So whether they play 50 games or 250 games, I mean, you pretty much kind of know what you're going to get out of them. But the teams that are really kind of, you're not sure what's going to happen, I think they're the ones that really could benefit from this, especially if they start the season strong out of the gate. They get a good start through those first couple of months, and then even, kind of fizzle out a little bit. You're hoping that the season is short enough to where any kind of, lull, any kind of dip in performance isn't going to hurt you as much as it would when you're looking at, 182 games there. So, or 62, excuse me. So that's what I would say. I personally, even under normal times, think 162 games in a regular season is just too much. I think we need to cut down a little bit, but that would definitely be interesting. So we'll see how that kind of unfolds. And I would just think that more of the mediocre teams that would benefit versus the teams that are expected to kind of be there come later on in the season.
Mm-hmm. Well, man, Ben, I don't know about you, but I think I've talked more baseball on this episode than I have probably in the last 10 years.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I hope our listeners
great.
enjoyed that little peek into the mind of someone who actually knows a little bit of baseball.
Yes.
But Daniel, I don't want to leave you without this. Like, give us what's going on in the Temple area. Do y'all call that? Is that Bell County? What do you even call that Temple Belton area of the state?
Yeah, so it's kind of known as just Central Texas generally, which is kind of goes all the way up to Waco and then out to Killeen West and the town I live in, which is Coppers Cove, which is about 45 minutes west of Temple. So just that whole area is kind of known as the Central Texas area. A really good high school football, a lot of talent there. Really good high school baseball, really year in and year out. Bell County is the county that Temple, Belton, and Killeen are in. So that's our main county that we service. We kind of keep up with all the news. Sports wise, man, it's rough. There's just, as you can imagine, there's just not a whole lot going around. Right now would really be our busiest time of the year. In the spring, we've got, you got boys and girls soccer, baseball, softball, swimming. You got to stay on top of powerlifting, wrestling. So just a bunch of different things. I think this past week would have been the state track and field meet in Austin, which is a huge deal. A lot of people are interested in that. So yeah, I mean, just to, again, back in March, had you told any of us that, hey, this is going to be the last game you're going to cover, probably for the rest of the year until, high school football come August, I would have definitely made us take a second to kind of enjoy it maybe a little bit more. Because as soon as it stopped, I mean, things really stopped. So, a normal day is, we try to design our section, just try to pull the biggest stories from the Associated Press sports department, whatever we think people are going to be interested in our readership area. We'll have local stories. We had a couple of stories the other day about how all of this is going to affect high school football in the fall, especially if they don't have spring practices right now, which would impact that. So kind of something like that. There's this big Fellowship of Christian Athletes All-Star weekend kind of that takes place, which people weren't sure if that was going to happen, but it looks like it is going to happen. But like with everything else, there's going to be no fans. So, I mean, the whole coronavirus, I mean, it's not just your professional leagues, although that's the biggest concern, but I mean, it stretches all the way down to college, to your local level. I mean, even T-ball, and youth baseball, Little League is what I'm looking for. So, it's pretty remarkable, but, yeah, I mean, we're trying to stay busy. Every now and then we'll get a regular news story, and we have to kind of remember what it's like to be regular news reporters and not sports guys. But can't complain, man. We're still working. No furloughs. No one's been laid off, anything like that. So you gotta count your blessings. So as long as we're employed, I don't think anyone's really complaining.
That's the truth. That's always good to hear. Well, awesome. Daniel, it's been great. Man, I don't know if this will be a draw for you or not, but our next episode's guest is the one and only Colin Weeder. So,
oh man, I hope y'all didn't think I talked too much, man. Colin Weeder, he might fill up an entire 45-minute podcast with just him. So,
we'll just ask him one question.
Yeah, just one question. And then sit back.
Oh yeah, no, Colin's a great guy. He is so much more knowledgeable than a lot of sports stuff than I am. So he'll get you some good stuff. You just might have to let him know, hey, remember to breathe and remember to let us talk every now and then if that's okay.
All right, guys, it has been great getting to talk a little baseball this episode. Like we just said and mentioned, next episode we will talk some Big 12 sports, specifically football, and a little bit of Oklahoma with Colin Weeder, as that's where he is currently. So until next time, have fun, be safe, and check out the rest of the Going for Two podcast. See ya.